It was the morning of Valentine's Day in the year 2000, and for Asha Degree, it started just as it usually did. She woke up early, ready to get her two kids, O'Brien and Asha, prepared for school. They'd had a bit of a rough night. The power had gone out, which meant the kids missed their bath, and that meant Asha knew she'd have to get up earlier to make sure they were ready for the day. But this wasn't just any ordinary Monday. It was also Asha and her husband Harold's 12th wedding anniversary. But what started out as a day of love and celebration quickly turned into the anniversary of the worst day of their lives. When Asha went into the children's bedroom to wake them up, she found O'Brien still asleep, but the bed belonging to her 9-year-old daughter Asha was empty. At first, Asha wasn't overly concerned. She figured Asha had woken up early and was somewhere else in the house, so she checked the bathroom, the kitchen, and all the other places her daughter could be. She called out her daughter's name, but there was no response. Panic started to bubble up inside her. She woke up Harold, and they searched the house again, but Asha was nowhere to be found. Harold had an idea. Maybe she'd gone over to see his mother, who lived nearby. Asha loved visiting her grandma, and even though it would have been very unusual for her to walk over on her own, there was a chance she had done just that. But when he called his mother, she hadn't seen or heard from Asha. Next, the couple raced outside, hoping to find her hiding inside one of their cars. But Asha wasn't there either. When there was no sign of Asha anywhere at the house, Asha called her own mother, who urged her to contact the police immediately. The police arrived at the Degree home by 6:40 a.m. They lived in a quiet suburban neighbourhood in Shelby, North Carolina, which is primarily a rural area. The family was well known in their community, and the neighbourhood quickly came together to search for Asha. Tracker dogs were brought in to help, but thanks to the storm from the previous night, the ground was slick and muddy, which made it impossible for the dogs to pick up any trace of Asha. Police and neighbours spread out, knocking on doors and calling out Asha's name, but there was no sign of her. By 7:30 a.m, nearly the entire neighbourhood had abandoned their daily routines to help search for the missing girl. But despite their efforts, the only thing they found was a single mitten, and Asha confirmed it didn't belong to her daughter. As the hours dragged on, and no trace of Asha came to the surface, the police took a closer look at the Degree home. There were no signs of forced entry, and no evidence to suggest that someone had broken in and taken Asha. But some of her personal belongings were missing, including a backpack, her Tweety Bird notebook, a pair of sneakers, and a few of her favourite clothes. The items suggested that Asha may have packed a bag and left the house on her own. But Asha and Harold were sure that was not the case. Asha was a shy and cautious girl. She was terrified of dogs, strangers, storms, and the dark. She wasn't the type to leave the house alone, especially not at night. The Degree family was well known, and they were by all accounts loving, protective, and deeply involved in their children's lives. Asha also had no access to the internet or any electronic devices, so she hadn't been exposed to outside influences. So what would prompt her to leave? At first, the runaway theory seemed like the most reasonable explanation to the authorities. But as more and more people came forward with their memories of who Asha was, the theory quickly began to fall apart. Asha Degree was born on the 5th of August 1990 in Shelby, North Carolina. She was in 4th grade at Falston Elementary and had a passion for basketball. She was a star point guard on her team, the Little Bulldogs, and her friendly demeanour made her well liked by her classmates and her basketball teammates. Asha loved to read, and she dreamed of becoming a writer one day. She was an exceptional student and frequently earned Student of the Week awards. She never missed school, and her teachers and peers knew her as a dedicated student. Outside of school, Asha spent a lot of time with her grandmother Joanne, who lived just down the street. Asha was described as responsible and sensible. She followed the rules, and she always played it safe. Her only sibling was her brother O'Brien, and he was 1 year older than Asha. He took the lead on keeping his little sister safe. They followed the same routine after school every day. They'd let themselves in, do their homework, and wait for their parents to return from work. All in all, Asha's life was stable and loving. There simply didn't appear to be any reason why she would feel unsafe enough to run away. The weekend before Asha's disappearance was a typical one for the family. On Friday, Asha spent time with her grandmother. On Saturday, she played in a basketball game, but she was fouled early and had to sit out for most of it. Her team lost, and she felt bad about her mistake. But by the time they watched her brother's game later that morning, she was back to her usual happy self. Sunday, the 13th of February, was routine as well. The family attended church in the morning and then went to a relative's house in the afternoon. By 8 p.m, Asha and O'Brien were in bed, and the house had settled into its usual calm, except for the raging storm and power cut. Everything seemed perfectly normal, but within hours, Asha would be gone. The first break in the case came the day after Asha was reported missing. 2 separate witnesses, a truck driver and a motorist, came forward to say they had seen a young girl matching Asha's description walking along Highway 18 between 3:45 and 4:15 a.m. on the 14th of February. Both recalled seeing a girl wearing a white long-sleeved shirt and white pants. This was the outfit the authorities had determined Asha was wearing based on what was missing from her room. Both of the motorists said they were baffled by the sight of such a young girl walking alone in the middle of the night in the rain. One of them circled back multiple times to check on her. He even stopped his car and tried to speak to Asha, but when he pulled up alongside the girl, she ran off into the woods. This behaviour matched with Asha's known fear of strangers. Both these leads were explored and an intensive search was carried out along the stretch of highway the motorists identified. On February the 17th, 3 days after Asha went missing, the search turned up new evidence that seemed promising. About 100 yards off Highway 18, they discovered a shed which was owned by a local store named Turner's Upholstery. Inside the shed, police found a few items that appeared to belong to a child. These included a Mickey Mouse hair bow, a pencil, and a green marker. When Akila was shown the items, she confirmed they belonged to her daughter. The shed quickly became the focus of the investigation. Police theorised that Asha may have gone into the shed to find shelter from the storm. But despite searching the area around the shed extensively, the only other items they found were a few candy wrappers from a snack Asha had been given at her basketball game 2 days earlier. Sniffer dogs were also brought in to search around the shed, but again the stormy weather had washed away any scent trails. The shed discovery gave the searchers hope that Asha would be found soon, but ultimately it did not lead to any breakthroughs. Just 1 week after Asha disappeared, the physical search was called off. For the next 18 months, Asha's case stagnated. Her parents and loved ones searched for her every day, but the official investigation turned up no solid leads. That was all until the 3rd of August 2001, when a construction worker made a startling discovery. He found a child's backpack buried along Highway 18. The backpack had been wrapped inside 2 plastic garbage bags. The name on the bag was Asha Degree, and the location was more than 26 miles from her home in Burke County. The plastic bags did not belong to Asha, and they did not match trash bags found at the Degree home. Inside the backpack, authorities found a few puzzling items. One was a Dr. Seuss book that Asha had borrowed from her school library. Nothing weird there. But the other item was a New Kids on the Block t-shirt, which didn't belong to Asha or anyone in her family. The discovery of the backpack was a significant moment in the investigation. Finally, the investigators had something solid, which indicated foul play was involved in her disappearance. The bag was sent to the FBI for forensic analysis, but no new leads emerged. With little physical evidence to go on, investigators and the public began to speculate on what could have happened to Asha Degree. Several theories have emerged over the years, including that Asha chose to run away from home for some reason. This theory is based on the fact that she packed a backpack and there were no signs of forced entry at the home. Some people speculated that Asha had been inspired by a book she read about children running away and having grand adventures. But this theory didn't hold up compared to what we know about Asha. She was shy, she followed the rules, and her parents were extremely protective. She had no reason to leave, and it didn't make sense that if she did want to run away, she would choose a stormy night to do so. Another theory was that she left the house while she was sleepwalking. Some people believe she may have gotten dressed, packed a bag, and wandered outside without being fully conscious of her actions. But the complexity of what she did, changing clothes, packing a bag, and locking the door behind her, makes this theory less plausible. Sleepwalkers can do some strange things, but it is unusual for them to engage in such detailed and intentional actions. Another possibility is that Asha might have been groomed by someone she trusted, perhaps a family friend, a teacher, a church leader, or someone from her basketball activities. This person could have convinced Asha to meet them somewhere in the early morning hours by promising something exciting or special. This might explain why she left the house willingly, but there has never been any direct evidence to suggest who this person might be, and the theory is based entirely on speculation, not on evidence. Naturally, the investigation also had to explore the possibility that Asha's own parents or family were involved in her disappearance. During his police interviews, Harold said that the power was restored to the home just after midnight. This was around the same time that the storm cleared. He checked on the children at around 2:30 a.m, and at that time, both of the kids were safe in bed. Akila detailed putting the kids to bed and waking up when the alarm went off the next morning. There was nothing in either of their statements to indicate they were hiding anything, or that they were anything other than devastated by Asha's disappearance. Both Akila and Harold voluntarily underwent polygraph tests, which found no evidence of deception. Investigators also had to consider the possibility that more than one theory might be true at the same time. Perhaps Asha left the house voluntarily, but she was abducted shortly afterward by a predator. This theory aligns with the sightings of Asha walking along Highway 18. She may have been heading somewhere familiar, like her school, but she was intercepted by someone with bad intentions. 2 motorists saw her near the highway, and one tried to approach her, so it's possible that Asha was simply trying to avoid the danger of that before she ran into even worse trouble. The discovery of Asha's backpack, 26 miles from where she was last seen, only adds to the mystery. The fact it was buried and wrapped in plastic bags suggests that someone was trying to hide it. And the New Kids on the Block t-shirt raised questions about who else might have been involved in her disappearance. Some speculate that Asha may have been hit by a car while walking down the road, and the driver panicked and tried to cover up the accident, like a hit and run. This theory suggests that the driver may have taken Asha's body and disposed of her belongings to avoid detection. No physical evidence has been found to support this theory, and there were no signs of blood or tyre marks along the highway. Others believe that Asha's disappearance is linked to a known sexual predator or serial offender. In 2014, a man named Donald Ferguson was arrested for the 1990 murder of a 7-year-old girl in North Carolina. Ferguson had been close to the victim's family and even helped search for the girl. He was also known to have sexually assaulted another child in 1997, 3 years before Asha went missing. Although Ferguson's crimes align with the profile of someone who could have abducted Asha, again, there's no direct evidence linking him to her case. In May 2016, 15 years after Asha's disappearance, the FBI released new information based on a witness tip. The witness claimed to have seen a girl matching Asha's description, getting into a dark green, early 1970s Lincoln Continental Mark IV or a Ford Thunderbird along Highway 18, right around the area where she was last reported walking. The witness claimed the car was distinctive as it had rust around its wheel wells. This lead reignited interest in Asha's case, but the vehicle wasn't found and no additional witnesses came forward. The fact it took 17 years for this witness to speak up also raised questions about the reliability of the sighting. Is it realistic that the witness genuinely remembered these specific details after 15 years? Then, in November 2020, a convicted sex offender named Marcus Mellon, who was serving time for crimes against children, sent a letter to the Shelby Star newspaper. He claimed to know that Asha had been murdered and he knew the location of her remains. The police investigated Mellon's statement, but in February 2021, they announced that there were no new leads or evidence in the case. This false lead added to the heartbreak and frustration that the Degree family had already endured for 21 long years. Asha's case was unsolved, while her parents continued to hold on to the hope that one day they would learn the truth. For the Degree family, Asha's disappearance has been an ongoing nightmare. More than 20 years later, Akila Degree still clings to the hope that her daughter will return home. She said, quote, "This is harder than death, because at least with death there is closure. But we can't mourn, and we can't give up. All we have left is hope." End quote. Asha's mother is convinced that someone out there knows what happened to her daughter, and that the truth will eventually come to light. In 2020, she said that she believed her daughter was still alive. Quote, "After 20 years, I still believe my daughter is alive. I do not believe she is dead. And I know someone knows something. I'm not crazy enough to think that a 9-year-old can disappear into thin air without somebody knowing something." End quote. Every year, the family honours Asha's memory by organising a walk to raise awareness and keep the search for her alive. They walk from their home to a large billboard with Asha's picture on it, hoping to inspire anyone with information to come forward. The Degrees have also established a scholarship fund in Asha's name for children in need. For several years, there were no new updates in the case, but then in 2024, Asha's disappearance was back in the spotlight, and this time, there's DNA evidence. In September 2024, the FBI, along with state and local investigators, announced they had executed search warrants at a property on Cherryville Road in Cleveland County. The property is owned by Roy Lee and Connie Dedman. Officers also searched 4 separate properties owned by the same family in Mecklenburg and Lincoln counties. The search warrant documentation was released to the public, and it confirmed what many have said all along. Investigators believe that Asha was murdered around the time of her disappearance, and that her body was hidden to conceal her death. Although initial reports about the backpack and the t-shirt said that there were no new leads from the evidence, that was not the truth. In fact, 2 hairs were found on the backpack, and each produced a separate DNA profile. Those profiles belonged to 2 people, Russell Underhill and Anna Lee Dedman. Anna Lee Dedman is one of Roy and Connie's 3 daughters. She would have been a teenager at the time Asha disappeared. Russell Underhill lived at an assisted living facility which was owned by the Dedmans at the time of Asha's disappearance. He was a Vietnam veteran who struggled with depression, alcohol and substance abuse. He was 54 years old when he was found dead, slumped over the couch in his living room, wearing only a pair of burgundy shorts. That was in 2004, 4 years after Asha went missing. Police did not find evidence of homicide or unusual circumstances in Russell's death, but strangely, the medical examiner was unable to determine a cause of death for him. Russell's autopsy report indicates that he had coronary artery disease, but there was no indication he had a heart attack. He also had evidence of older brain injuries, potentially from his time in the military. The police report into Russell's death said he had several caregivers and counsellors who checked up on him, because of his past history with substance abuse. It also stated that a caregiver reported one of their other clients had threatened to kill Russell a few days before he was found deceased. According to police documents, Russell occasionally spent time in a couple of the care facilities the Deadmans operated. They were listed as his emergency contacts at the time of his death, and Connie was in charge of administering his medications during the time he stayed in their care homes. The search warrant documentation names Roy and Connie Deadman as the only suspects in Asha's disappearance and suspected homicide. Their lawyer responded to the claims by saying that they believe the search of their property would reveal who was responsible for Asha Degree, and it wasn't his clients. He said that the person who was responsible for her death was likely already deceased. Although Annalee's DNA was found with Asha's backpack, officials do not believe she was involved in Asha's murder. She was just 13 years old when Asha went missing, and her sisters Lizzie and Sarah were also teenagers at the time. The search of the properties in 2024 did turn up some results. At the Cleveland property, officials recovered a green-coloured vehicle which matched the description of the car which a witness said they had seen Asha getting into. According to police records, one of the Deadmans' daughter would drive a green AMC Ramble to transport patients between the hospital and the facilities her parents operated. The Cherryville property where that vehicle was found is located just 6 minutes away from where Asha was last seen walking down the road on the night she disappeared. Some of the other items seized in the searches include mobile phones, computers, disposable cameras, notebooks, and journals. There's also a tooth in a Ziploc bag, a pair of earrings, a rifle, SD cards, paperwork, other records, and VHS tapes. But perhaps most importantly, no human remains were recovered during the search. We're still awaiting further updates on this case about whether anything from the search indicates what really happened to Asha Degree. But for now, her disappearance is one of the more mysterious cases to come out of North Carolina. It's been 24 years, and yet despite these exhaustive searches, investigations, and national media attention, there's been no definitive answer as what happened to the bright, happy 9-year-old girl who vanished on Valentine's Day. Asha would now be in her 30s. To this day, her personal items, including her basketball shirt and trophies, are still on display in her parents' home. Age progression photos of Asha are a constant reminder of the little girl who never came home. Her family continues to hold on to the hope that someday, somehow, against the odds, she will return.